This is Twit.
We did get word from the Obama administration announcing reforms of the National Security Agency's surveillance programs. And basically, there weren't too many surprises there. More transparency being afforded to companies who want to let people know exactly what they're being asked to, provided more freedom and flexibility to disclose that information. And there's a really good article by Stephen Levy at Wired going over the ramifications of the reforms for Silicon Valley firms. And his overall take, having parsed the president's remarks, is that he's not too sanguine that Silicon Valley firms are going to be able to salvage and restore the public trust in the fact that they're holding a lot of our data. Evan, do you agree with Stephen Levy that that's going to be a tough thing to shore up?
Well, I mean, the way I read his article here is that and to a great extent, he's having to divine a lot what Silicon Valley firms might be thinking about, for example, Google, and Apple might be thinking about in all of this, is that there's no cause for celebration yet because of the presidential order here, because it didn't do away with the surveillance program altogether. And so that's why it didn't go far enough. Clearly, the biggest thing to be optimistic about and to be pleased about from all this is, as you mentioned there, Denise, the greater increase in transparency. And that's going to benefit not only the providers of service, the Silicon Valley firms who provide these massive platforms, but also the users as well. Because the biggest thing that just gets us at a real gut level in all this is the fact that our communications, the metadata about those communications, to be fair and accurate about this, seems to just go out there into a black box, and especially with proceedings in front of the FISA court, this whole notion of the secrecy in which all of this is clouded leaves us generally pretty uncomfortable about the sorts of information that's being gathered, what information the government is looking for, how often it's done. So I think that will do quite a bit to mitigate public concern, this greater notion of transparency, more information about what information is gathered in relation to the overall volume of information that the companies have about us. That should do something to set the public at ease. As far as the ultimate conclusion of Stephen Levy's article here, again, it doesn't sound like anything short of having done away with the NSA data collection program would have gotten him to say anything positive, or to come out with a completely positive pronouncement about it here.
All right. There are some more reforms aside from simply giving companies the ability to talk more than they've been able to in the past. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court is going to add members with expertise in civil liberties and technology, and is going to be authorized to declassify, or maybe ordered to declassify, more of its decisions. Also, there's going to be a review panel to figure out the government's stance on big data privacy. And Stephen Levy points out in his article, this could be helpful because U.S. companies are constantly trying to keep up with the different laws that they have to comply with, both in the United States and internationally, particularly in the EU, where privacy rules are much more restrictive. But on the other hand, Stephen is worried that this panel might take not such a positive view of the practices that companies are engaged in. The president himself, in his remarks, said something his exact quote was, "The challenges to our privacy do not come from government alone. Corporations of all shapes and sizes track what you buy, store and analyze our data, and use it for commercial purposes. That's how those targeted ads pop up on your computer or your smartphone." So it sounds like President Obama's not telling Silicon Valley that they're off the hook either. If the government is getting a whole bunch of flack for looking into people's data, I guess the message here is that you're making it not just easy for the government to do it, but you're making use of that data as well. Lisa, what do you think the response to this is going to be?
Well, I think that everyone is sort of uniformly meh about it. It was very interesting to shed a light, though, on what we currently have in terms of transparency in the NSA's collection of data. There is also an article in Ars Technica that goes over some points in the report. And one thing that I found interesting was that this foreign intelligence surveillance court or whatever, even though it's called a court, it really doesn't have much transparency. Apparently, it's a court only open to the government. And apparently one of Obama's notes there was that he's going to pay to have a human rights representative on this court, which to people like us who are used to the adversarial, open and public process is kind of like, okay, great. I mean, if you're going to call it a court, why don't you have something that most of us are used to? But it's an incredibly Byzantine scheme, it seems to me. I mean, these Silicon Valley companies have done quite a bit with our personal data themselves. I mean, most of their business models incorporate in some way quantifying advertising to or collecting our data somehow. So, you know, it's something to study and to watch. I sort of took the point of the article to be that they're all in it together, government and Silicon Valley. So they might as well keep talking and keep working together. But the more transparency there is, the better it is ultimately for those of us who use and are monitored by these services.